Okay, my clock says 6:30. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me for the record book options webinar. And I'm Gemma Miner. I'm the academic coordinator for volunteer engagement at the state 4-H office. And I'm also the co-chair of the Incentives and Recognition Advisory Committee. And that's the hat I'm wearing tonight, sharing with you how you navigate record books with the new achievement program. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about tonight is I'm going to review the record book content by 4-H age. We'll go through junior options, intermediate options, and senior options. And there is plenty of time for Q&A. The presentation part is fairly short, and then we'll have time for questions. As we go through, though, just go ahead and put your questions in the chat. This is a presentation, the first part, and then depending on how many people end up in the room, we could open it up just for verbal questions, which also works. But for now, if you have questions as I'm moving along, go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll answer them as we go. Okay, to get us grounded in just the purpose of record books, I just want to review quickly that it gives members a time to reflect on their yearly work. And then members set goals and develop plans to meet those goals. And then ultimately, the purpose of record books is to teach members the skills in record keeping management. So just helping our young people learn how to keep records is the purpose of our record books. So just moving right into it, junior member options. If members are 9 or 10 years old, they have two options for a record book. If they want to submit a record book, then these are their options. I want to remind everyone that there's two programs going on here simultaneously. We've got the achievement program, then we've got the record book program. They're different programs, but they do have a relationship to each other. I am not going to spend any time tonight talking about achievement programs. I can answer some simple questions, but there is training on the achievement program if you don't know the new achievement program. So for junior members this year, we're going to see two types of books. We're going to see books with Spark achievements in them and books with no achievements in them. Okay. So if they're working on their Spark achievements, their book will have in this order. And all this is in the manual. It's also on the state 4-H California resource website. And I can show you that at the end if people don't know where that's at. So a Spark achievement book has a cover page, a table of contents, and then their Spark Achievement form wherever they're at. In the Spark Achievement program, there's one form and it's a cumulative form as they work on it. So whatever their current form is, wherever they're at in achieving the benchmarks on the form, they download a copy, make a copy, and put that as the third section of their book. Then there's their My 4-H story, and their story can be multimedia. So their story can be written, it can be a video, it can be an audio recording, it can be a slide deck, it can be a storyboard of some kind. So there are lots of options for telling their My 4-H story, but there's guidelines in the manual for how many words, what's the length of a video, those kinds of things. Be sure and follow the guidelines in the manual. Then the third section or the fifth section is their annual project report forms, how many ever projects they did. They should have one APR is what we call them for every project they completed with a related expression page. And then one leadership report. If they had any leadership roles that are on the leadership report form, then they would fill it out one time. They don't do a leadership report for every single APR. They do it once. And it fills in all the gaps for all the things. We recommend that, let's say they're a junior leader for, actually they wouldn't be a junior leader as a junior member because they can't do that till they're 11. Well, let's say they're a club officer, not necessarily related to a project, but if they're a club officer, like they're a historian at 10 years old, so we have some clubs where we have young members filling officer roles. So they would fill out the leadership report form and check their club officer and put that report behind the first APR. So if they have 5 APRs, put it behind the first one, and they only do it once. And then there's an optional activity summary page, and that page goes as the last section. Once again, and that one is optional. They're not, when we do evaluations, if they go to any evaluation competition, there's no evaluation scoring that happens on that one because it's an optional page, but it does capture all their 4-H work over the course of the year. And if they're not doing any achievements, it's exactly the same, except they don't put in any kind of Spark achievement form. That's just missing. And then the rest of them are all scored as a separate type of book. So they don't get penalized if they don't have a Spark achievement form. It's just scored differently than a Spark, and then an achievement book is scored. Okay, any questions about juniors? Seeing none, I'm going to keep going. Intermediate members. So the options for intermediate members take some prefacing. So if they had a previous star rank, so you're an intermediate member and you have at least a bronze star from the star rank system, you have multiple options. You can either do Spark achievements, Emerald Star 1 and 2. You could be going on in that form, or you can be continuing your star ranks. So that's the Spark achievement star ranks is they're both optional if you want to keep, if you're still in submitting an achievement related book, then you're going to have one or the other. You would not have a star rank and a Spark achievement because you need to pick a lane. Your members need to pick a lane. It's like if you're doing Sparks, the new achievement program or the historic star rank program, but their book should reflect one or the other, but not both. Okay, or they could have no further achievements desired. Let's say that they had a previous star rank, but this year they didn't do any star ranks. And that's perfectly fine. They just wouldn't put any, they would not put the PDR, those kinds of things in the front of the book. And I'll talk about that at the next slide, what actually goes in the book. But there's all these options if you had a previous star rank. If you had no previous achievements, the options for intermediate members are doing your Spark achievements and then moving on to Emerald Star 1 and 2, or having no achievements desired. So previous star ranks, no previous achievements, and I guess I could also be previous Spark achievements, but that would go in the book as well. So knowing all those conditions, this is kind of what an intermediate book looks like. So if they're working on Sparks, Emerald Star 1 or 2 as their achievements. So they're basically in the new achievement strategy or the new achievement progress. So their book would look like cover page, table of contents, related achievement forms they worked on in this current year, whether they might have worked on Sparks as well as Emerald Star 1. And maybe, I think we might have a few members who may have been able to accomplish finishing their Sparks, Emerald Star 1 and Emerald Star 2 all in one year. That would be pretty unusual, but possible. So whatever forms they worked on, that would go in the third section. And then their My 4-H story, annual project report forms, all of these stay the same. Expression pages, leadership report with the same information I talked about with the junior leadership report form behind the first APR, and then their activity summary, once again, optional. If an intermediate is continuing in the star rank program, just a note that the star rank program we're planning to sunset that program on June 30th, 2027. So this is a new date. So just make a note of it. It could change. It wouldn't change forward. The only way it would change is if we gave members more time because we discover that we still have members working on, their platinum, and we'll do that. Denise, can you type your question in the chat? Do you have chat capability? Or you can just hang on to your question. I'll get to it in a second. Okay, cool. Yeah, great. Thanks, Denise. Just go ahead and type it in the chat for me. Star ranks. So star ranks follow the star rank manual, just like the new achievement program follows that manual. So the star rank manual is the same. Cover page, table of contents, their PDR, personal development report, My 4-H story, their annual project report forms and expression pages, their collection of work, and then the leadership development report if they're counting significant leadership credits. And I think this is where people get confused. So if, let's say you have a member who is in a star rank book, they want to submit a star rank book, but they're in between earning star ranks, and they really didn't do anything in this year that was a significant leadership credit that helped them earn that. And significant leadership credit is about earning a significant leadership role that is at least 20 hours of work during the year. So if they don't have any of that, then, and they're not counting it on their PDR, they don't have to do the leadership development report. I think some people think that they have to do the LDR every single time regardless. And that's only true if they're counting, they're trying to get points for credits for their star rank on their PDR. So they can actually leave out their LDR if they don't need it. Okay. Okay, Denise, for intermediate members, do they have to do all 4 Spark achievements before starting Emerald Star? Yes. So your intermediate members do have to do all 4 levels of the Spark achievements. But remember, your intermediate members can use their previous work to count toward their Spark achievements as long as they didn't use that previous work to earn any stars. So if they never earned a bronze star or any star along the way, they can go back, like, and then go back years, like go, if they started 4-H when they were, 9, they can actually do the 2 previous years work if they, as long as they have some documentation that they can show what they did. Yeah. Oh, they just started 11 or 12. Yeah, then they definitely need to do all of the Sparks, and they probably I don't know if an 11 or 12-year-old could do all 4 Sparks in 1 year. It might be pretty hard, but I guess it would be possible. I haven't seen a book like that yet, so it's hard to say. But they would definitely need to start their Sparks first. And remember, intermediates are 3 years, so they have plenty of time, even if they do, a couple years of Sparks and then start their ES 1 and 2 as a 13-year-old, they'll have plenty of time even to finish it. So there's no rush. And I talk about that in the advancement of the achievement program. It's like, don't rush to move our members through, that they should be doing other things in 4-H, not just achievements. So then they may never finish Emerald Star. Oh, they should finish Emerald Star. Yeah, because we have a member, I know of at least one member that was able to do her Emerald Star 1 and 2. She's a senior member, but 13 or 14. She's a brand new senior member. She was able to do Emerald Star 1 and 2 this year, and she started an Impact Star. So it's highly possible. It depends on how motivated each member is. But when we piloted this program that we're getting into the achievement program, sorry, I don't want to get down this rabbit hole too far, but many of our intermediate members who were piloting it were able to do Emerald Star 1 and 2 in 1 year. And so we don't want them to do that. It's like, take their time, but it's possible. Okay. And not just possible, it's probable for them to finish that. Okay, if there are no achievements, the only other option is working on no achievements. And so cover page, table of contents, their story, APRs, and activity summary. Pretty simple for intermediate members and junior members who are not doing any achievement program at all. Okay. Any more questions about intermediates? Somebody had a question. Kathy, go ahead and type it. Is the no achievement a new concept? Not really. I think members always have the option of doing, we've in the past, what we've tended to do was conflate or confuse, mash up the achievement program with the record book, and people equated them to be one and the same. So we have members who never did record books because they didn't want to do star ranks, but they didn't do record books either because they thought they were one and the same. And so with this new achievement program, when we really looked at it, we said, we've got 2 things happening. There's an achievement program and a record book program. They're related to each other. They have a relationship, but they are not the same being. Okay. So we're very intentional about splitting that out now and making sure that people understand that even if you're not working on achievements, you can submit a record book. Because what we're going back to that first slide, what are we trying to accomplish with the record book? And record books is about learning how to keep records. It's not about achievements. But if we are doing achievements, then documenting our achievements is an important part of our record keeping skills. Okay? We didn't have this for PBR version, did we? No, because I just kind of answered that. We didn't have it because everyone confused, or we combined the two. And now we're intentionally splitting them. I don't think it was ever intended to be that way, but it kind of is how it progressed and was, it's just how our culture in 4-H in California was, that equated record book with achievements, and the two were intertwined and not separated out so clearly. Okay. All right, moving on to senior members. Very similar to the intermediate members. If they have a previous star rank, their options are they can work on Spark achievements, optional. For senior members, they only need to do one level though. If they have at least a bronze, actually misspoke. If they have at least a bronze, they skip Spark achievements and they go to Emerald Star 1. So if they had a previous rank, they can do it Sparks if they want to. That's why it's optional. Then they move to Emerald Star 1, 2, and then go on to Impact Stars. Or they can continue their star ranks, whatever they want to do there. Or they can say, I don't want any more achievements. Or, and it moves into the no achievement desired option, or what that record book looks like, because they may have earned their platinum and they don't want to start a new achievement program and they're happy where they are. Perfectly fine. But they can still do a record book without having to do the PDR and the LDR and all the other components of the old historic book. And then if they have no previous achievements, then a senior member, we want them to do at least one Spark level. They don't have to do all 4. Intermediate members need to do all 4. Senior members need to do just one level of Spark achievement. And we'll start 1, 2, and then moving on to Impact Stars. And they could say, if I didn't have previous achievements, I have no desire to do them. That's perfectly fine. And they can still do a record book. And we want them to do a record book. Okay. Senior member options look a lot like intermediate member options, except for the addition of the 4-H resume. So if they're working on the Spark achievement, Emerald Star 1, 2, and Impact Stars, same thing. Cover page, table of contents, their related achievement forms, whatever they worked on that year, their story, their APRs, activity summaries optional, and then their 4-H resume. If they're working on star ranks, it's whatever the manual says. We have not done any changes to that. It's still the same. Cover page, table of contents, PDR, story, APR, collection of work, LDR, leadership development report. If they're counting significant leadership. If they're not counting significant leadership on their PDR, they don't need to do an LDR. And then their 4-H resume. And then finally, no achievements. It just leaves out that section of any achievements they're working on. So if they don't have any achievements, cover page, table of contents, their story, APRs, their activity summary is optional, and then their 4-H resume. We're actually encouraging that activity summary because it does capture all the things they did in 4-H, not just things that were based on achievements. And in this case, they weren't working on achievements, but it's a way to capture, all their activity in 4-H, because it does help them when they go back and look at their record books when they're preparing their applications for college, they're looking for a job. So college and career readiness opportunities, if they've kept their record book, it really helps them to be able to reflect back and go, oh yeah, I know all these things, or I did all these things, and I learned a lot about leadership, or I learned a lot about public speaking, all the things that we know our 4-Hers are better than many of their peers at. And then I sent you this in the email. Remember, the California 4-H Resource Center is the place where all the materials are housed. A recording of this webinar will be posted on that resource center as soon as I get a good recording. And then the private Facebook group, there's 2. We have the California 4-H record book support. And since we're talking about record books tonight, that's the one I wanted to focus on. But there's also one for the achievement program. And this is the time of year where there starts to be lots of activity on both of our Facebook groups, because people are asking questions toward the end of the year. So there's starting to be lots of chatter on both of those Facebook pages, and they're really good groups because people do interact and help each other. In fact, I think Denise, you helped somebody today answer a question. Thank you for doing that. Okay, Joy, if they're working on their platinum star currently, they can just continue on. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If they're working on their platinum star and they're an intermediate or senior member, I'm assuming, because usually juniors can't get that far. And junior, whoopsie, I don't know what happened there, but something went to miss. Hang on. Did I lose you all? There we go. Let me just stop. I don't know what's happening there, but something weird was happening. Senior member, yeah. Okay, let's see. And at this point, since we're the presentation now is just Q&A, and I can show you other things. So you could unmute yourself and ask questions. Let me answer these two that are in the chat. But if you have other questions, just raise your hand, and then I'll call on you, and you can ask your questions just verbally. That's easier than typing sometimes. Let's see. I have two boys, one junior and one intermediate, and this is our first year. For the 2 slides for junior intermediate, do they just choose one of the 2 paths in the corresponding slides? Yes. So Kathy, it's a complex problem answer. So for junior members, remember their options are no achievements, which is fine, or working on their Spark achievements. So that's your junior member has those 2 options if they want to do a record book. Okay. And then your intermediate member, they have multiple options, but how old is your intermediate member? Are they 11 or are they 13? 11. Okay, so brand new intermediate. So I would say if they want to work on achievements, do not start them on star ranks because they're likely not going to be able to finish the whole battery of the 4-star rank layers or levels. So I would say have them start with Spark achievements alongside your junior member and have them do it together. You know, it's like they're both working on the same thing. And your intermediate member is probably going to progress faster, and that's okay. That's kind of how it's designed. And so let your intermediate member continue to, complete that Spark achievements as fast as they can go. And then by the time they're 12, they might be able to move on to their Emerald Star 1 at that point. And then 13 Emerald Star 2, and that'll set them up nicely to start their Impact Stars when they're a senior. Because they can't do an Impact Star until they are a senior. Like I said, no reason to rush, especially during that intermediate age, where they have plenty of time to complete their Sparks and then do their Emerald Stars 1 and 2. Yeah. So they just keep going on that path. So I think maybe the confusion was, it's like, well, when we get to seniors, we have to do Impact Stars. It's like, not necessarily. It depends on where you're at on the progression, because the new achievement program is a progression. You don't do one until you do the previous one. And when you finish it, you just move on, and you move on in whatever sequence you're at the time. Perfectly fine. Are we still saying that if a member will not have their bronze star by June 30th, they should switch to the new program? Yeah, essentially, yeah. That was a year ago. If they didn't have their bronze by last summer, we said switch to the new program. So that's basically still in effect. If they don't have their bronze by now, they really shouldn't start star ranks because they won't have time to finish it. Okay, so they've been at it for 3 years and still don't have their bronze. You know what I would do, Denise? I would really recommend that they take all the work that they did toward their bronze and pop it into the Spark achievements. And I'll bet they'll have close to all 4 levels already done. And it really sets them up nicely to be able to continue on that new achievement path. That's what I would really recommend with that. Can you share a bit about the expectation story? Okay. They were trying to finish. Yeah, I would have them just switch over. Yeah. Okay. Is it Lilia? Let me go ahead. I'm going to share, I'm going to show the resource center to everybody. And we'll pull up some manuals so I can show you where those materials kind of live. Let me share my screen. Maria, go ahead and ask your question out loud while I'm setting this up. You should be able to, oh, can you unmute yourself? Maybe you can't. Hang on, let me make sure I on. I may not have set that up correctly. Okay, Maria, try now. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually, I have a couple questions. So I have my daughter, she's 15, and
Okay.
last June she received the Platinum Star. So
Okay.
I was wondering what's her next step if she wants to keep doing it with record books. Another question, which is my younger ones, they were working towards the Bronze Star last year, or was more than 1 year, and then because when we did the program last year, they didn't had the Bronze Star yet. We apply all they had it towards that to the Sparks achievements, so
Uh-huh.
they were able to complete the four thing.
Yeah.
So now my question is wondering what's the next step for them as well.
Okay. How old are your younger members?
Uh, 10 and 12.
Okay, so they're intermediate. So your 10-year-old will they be an intermediate well, let me ask it this way. How old will they be on December 31st of this year? Your 10-year-old.
Okay, both of them turn on, so 10 in February, and the 12-year-old just turned 12 a few days ago.
Okay, so your 10-year-old is still essentially going to be a junior member in December. So basically they're just hanging out for another year, unfortunately, but your 12-year-old can go on to Emerald Star 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
about daughter, that she completed
Right.
the old system, so she got the platinum done.
So it's up to her. So her options, remember, were that she can do no achievements if she wants and still do a record book, or she can start the Emerald Star 1. If she
Okay,
wants to keep earning achievements, then have her go back and start Emerald Star 1.
sounds good. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So here's the Resource Center. Let me share my screen. I sent that to you in the email, but let me show you where the materials live. So if you go to 4-H Basics, and then the drop down will show you record books. It'll take you to the record book page. And then you'll have to pick a lane. Basically, are you working on the achievement program or the star rank program? And so, okay, I lost the chat here. Let me pull it over to where I can see it. Okay, there we go. 4-H story and expression page. So it depends on what book you're in a little bit. So is it Lilia? Sorry, I'm mispronouncing your name, but can
That's
you
okay. Yeah, it's Lilia. I have one junior and one intermediate.
okay.
That'll be working on the first Spark achievement this year.
They're both working on Sparks?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what you need to do is go ahead and click on this record book manual for the new achievement program, and it will open the manual for you. And I would just download it and just save it, to your desktop or, whatever. And it will tell you, it'll walk you through what's required on each section. So if you scroll down, so here's the My 4 story instructions. So if they're a junior and they're doing writing, it's 250 to 500 words. Or if they're doing a video or audio, it's 1 to 2 minutes. And then we also give guidance somewhere. Where is that? And if they do a slide deck, I think we say, limit that to, that's not in the manual. We need to fix that. I think it's on the score sheet. So we need to make sure that gets transferred over. But if they do a slide deck, it's, like, I don't think it was 5 to 7 slides or something like that. No more than that many. So that's where you learn about your story. And then we give prompts. What's included in your story? So if you want to break it up into parts, tell us about you, tell us about your projects, your leadership and civic engagement, and 4-H, how 4-H has impacted your life, basically. So that's some guidance. If they don't know what to write about, then at least there's some prompts there to help them kind of decide what story am I going to tell? And then expression pages is right here. So if you go to it's under APRs, but expression pages, include one expression page for each APR. And the expression page is a way for them to be creative. It can be graphics, hand drawn. People have used clip art, all kinds of things. We've even had some 3D kind of expression pages, which is hard to send. They have to take a picture of it and then send it to us, of course, digitally to fit into their book. But their expression page has to teach the reader, so the evaluator essentially, something that you learned that was interesting to you. So sometimes we have things like people will show us the parts of a chicken, right? Or they'll show us, I learned how to do this kind of stitch during crochet, and they'll do a graphic of how it happens. So it can be like, this describes all of that, a drawing, written words. It can be written words, it can be a photograph, but if they use a photograph, they really have to describe, though. It can't just be a picture with a caption. The caption or whatever they write has to teach the reader something. So we have to learn something as the evaluator. That's the real benchmark of an expression page. Okay. An expression page now can be a video or auto recording as well. And it needs to be less than 5 minutes. So they can also teach the reader visually through a video or through an audio recording in the new achievement program. Okay. Any other questions about that? So that's where you get that piece of information. Okay. Is the LDR different for the new program? Yes. So let's go back and I'll show you that. It's not even, we're calling it just the leadership report, not the leadership development report. So that the development word is a little different. So the leadership report looks like this. It's just one page, really simple. So they have in order to do the leadership report, they need to fill one of these roles. It can be an other leadership role, but we rarely see members filling that out. But there could be something in the county, a leadership role that we don't know about. Like I think I know there is one county that does like a junior county ambassador. They don't call it that, they call it something else, but it's like that. And so that would count here. But that's just one county. So, and then they just say, what were your overall leadership goals this year? Actually, it's 2 pages, sorry, I misspoke. I gave them more space. And how did you meet your goals? If things got in your way, what did you do to reach your goals or shift your gears? And then it's a sign off page. That's it. And it's one time annually, 1 page or one report. Okay. Okay. So they can't start Emerald Star 1 until they're an intermediate member, no matter what. Correct, Rochelle. They have to be an intermediate member to start Emerald Star 1. It's developmentally not designed for junior members. So remember when we originally introduced the new achievement program, we spent a lot of time talking about being age appropriate. We built the progression so that they were age appropriate and didn't rush people through the program, our members through. Then we wanted to make them developmentally appropriate. So they became more challenging. It does become more challenging as we move forward. Sparks is pretty simple. And I think at one point people were concerned, like, well, if it's going to be this, that's too simple. It's like, I kept saying, hang on, wait for it, because it does become more complex and everything is building on each other. So we do want them to wait until they're an intermediate member, 11-year-old, to start Emerald Star 1 and then progressing on. Will we have access to this recording to share with other members? Yes, Maria, I'll be posting a recording. It might not be this exact one, but this is, the questions are great. So I actually might use this one, even though I stumbled over my words in the beginning, but yeah, so this might be a really good one to use. So this will be posted on the website, that same resource center website that I showed you a minute ago. And it'll probably take our marketing folks a week or 2 to get it up. So I would say by the end of this month, it should be there and ready for access. Okay, and they can use the new leadership report even if they're doing star ranks. No, remember you have to pick a lane. If you're doing star ranks, you have to do the star rank manual and the star rank book. So if we go back to the resource center, if you're doing star ranks, you have to follow the star rank manual, which is the other manual. And you have to follow the templates in that. So you cannot do the leadership report instead of the LDR if you're doing star ranks. And the only reason you need to do an LDR, a member needs to do an LDR, is if they're working on significant leadership credits on their PDR. So let me show you that. I don't have a form right here. I just have the. Here we go. Leadership development. Remember, so significant leadership roles. So if they're counting significant leadership roles, then they have to do an LDR to support that. If they don't have any significant leadership roles that year, then they don't have to do an LDR, but they don't do a leadership report in place of it. Would you send the link for the APR that needs to be filled out for each annual project? There seems to be more than one form on the website. Oh, there shouldn't be. They should be all the same. They're the same. So you're good. So click on either one of them. They're the same document. So, and I don't know, there might have been, you might have gotten, or before we made the switch in August, like if you downloaded something in July, they might have been separate at that time and now they're not. So that might have been where the confusion is. Yeah, the title may be different. Yeah, it probably says for new achievements, but that would be the only change and it's not super important. No one's going to judge that. We're not going to say, you know, yeah, they're fine. We should actually just make that exactly the same for next year. So I'm glad it came up. This training count as a Sparks leadership activity and attend a 4-H leadership conference, workshop, or training. I'm glad they're taking notes, but this isn't really a leadership training. It's a technical training. So I'm trying to think where it could count. You might look at it in the Sparks to see if there's something in the communication section where it might count. I don't have them memorized off the top of my head, so I don't know, but it's not a leadership activity, but that's a good question. Joy, like club officer. I know it's out of context. Okay. Yeah, so if they're a club officer and they're counting, and club officers typically serve more than 20 hours a year. So if they're a club officer and they want to count that for significant leadership, they need to complete an LDR, which is in the Star Rank program side. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Gemma, as you're opening those,
Yeah.
is the 20 hours, is that what kind of like really qualifies it as significant leadership experience?
Yes.
Okay. So if they're like, some clubs have additional officers that, don't do typically very much, and they're usually the younger kids. So then that wouldn't, depending on the situations, it could or could not be considered significant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
But
And
the main
remember,
club officers all should be considered significant.
if they're doing Star Ranks and they have to be older anyway, because
Right.
junior members can't be doing Star Ranks at all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And what was I going to say? Yeah, and the benchmark really is that 20 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, and the manual kind of, if you remember, I always have to go back to it too. I think I caught all the questions, or you can unmute yourself. Anything else?
I'm going to circle back to that question that she asked about the kids that are here tonight. So if they wanted to kind of take what they've learned from tonight and turn it into a leadership opportunity or training, can they lead a training and teach their peers what they learned tonight?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yep. And then it would become a leadership project or a leadership, it will meet that leadership benchmark. Yeah. So if they want to do that, just do even just a presentation, demonstrating your leadership skills, presentation skills, you can count it. That way, if you do a presentation, you can count it in 2 places too. Remember, on the Spark Achievement, you can count the same activity twice in 2 different areas if you still need points somewhere else.
Gemma, I had a question about the collection of work. When I took this training last year, it was not part of the record book. It was somehow going to be combined with the 4-H story. Has that changed at all, or is that still the case?
So if you're doing the historic program, the collection of work is still there.
The new program.
What's that?
Yes, I was referring to the new program.
The new program. Okay, so to answer that question, yes, absolutely. That's a great question, Denise. Now, in the new achievement program, your My 4-H story can include multiple media. So you can include your pictures, you can take, you can add your certificate or a snapshot of your certificate and build those out into your slide deck, or adding multiple pages into your story with captions, so you can build it out that way. In the My 4-H story, we don't have page limits currently, but we do have word limits or slide deck numbers of slides limits, and certainly audio is limited. But if you do an audio recording, and then in your story section, you give us a URL of the audio recording or the video recording, and then you add some pictures with captions that's telling your story, I think that's perfectly fine. And that's where those kinds of things are built in now, because that your story can be multimedia. So, and you can use two forms of media in your 4-H story. So you can do a storyboard or a scrapbook page, or in addition to doing a video or your audio that goes along with it. We just don't want to make those too long, because then your evaluators, we don't want them to be spending, 20, 30 minutes just on the 4-H story. So be mindful of that. So I think moving forward, we'll probably set some guidance on those stories if they start to get a little out of control with adding too many pages. Don't try not to make those more than 5 pages long with whatever images and captions you add, or certificates you add in that section. Okay, that should work just fine. Thanks for that question. Okay, hearing nothing else, I'm going to say good night. Thanks for joining me. And if you're not in those Facebook groups and you still have questions, they're good to join, and